back to it.
It is obvious to the most simple-minded that Loci is of an inferior breed.
The obvious visual evidence, Commissioner, is that he is of the same breed as yourself.
Are you blind, Commander Spock? Oh, look at me.
I thought you scientists were supposed to keep an open mind.
There's a difference between keeping an open mind and believing something because you want it to be true.
Your friend Spock is a logical man.
I find your argument strewn with gaping defects in logic.
Most illogical reaction. We demonstrated our superior weapons. They should have fled.
You mean they should have respected us?
Of course.
Mr. Spock, respect is a rational process. Did it ever occur to you they might react emotionally? With anger?
Doctor, I'm not responsible for their unpredictability.
You do not think like the others. There are no colors to your patterns of logic. There's only black and white.
Logical, unemotional, completely pragmatic. And we poor, irrational humans whip them in a fair fight. Now you'll find yourself back among us illogical humans again.
Which I find eminently satisfactory, Doctor. For nowhere am I so desperately needed.
Because she feels. I don't. All I know is logic.
Will you try to understand how we feel about our life here? About each other?
Emotions are alien to me. I'm a scientist.
You're gonna leave here without them? Run off on some wild goose chase halfway across the galaxy just because you found a discrepancy in a hydrogen cloud?
Doctor, I'm chasing the captain, Lieutenant Uhura, and Ensign Chekhov, not some wild aquatic fowl.
Mr. Spock, you have a remarkably logical and analytical mind.
Thank you. I prefer the concrete, the graspable, the provable.
You'd make a splendid computer, Mr. Spock.
Sneako joined Mohammed Hijab on his podcast, episode number 14. And they discussed censorship, red pilling, and Islam.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you guys doing? And welcome to another episode of the MH podcast. Very irregular podcast, but an exciting one nonetheless. And we've got a very exciting guest, Sneako, a very notorious, prolific YouTuber who unfortunately has been deplatformed. An individual who's actually been mentioned, to my knowledge, in the Senate in the United States of America because of this issue of censorship. I think it's a good place for us to start, Sneako. What exactly happened? Did you break any community guidelines such that YouTube could decide to take you off the platform?
Yeah, I would like to call myself a former YouTuber, now Rumbler. And I guess I did break community guidelines, but there's very specific guidelines and there's a specific narrative that they try to push with what you're allowed to talk about and what you're not allowed to talk about. I don't want to get you a strike if I talk about these certain issues, but it relates to Big Pharma and Pfizer and the election misinformation, cyberbullying, just random political issues that they want you to have a specific idea about, and if you don't believe what they want you to believe.
Sorry to cut you off. Were you given a strike and then a second strike and a third strike, or was it just one go?
It was 3 strikes, but the last 2 came in the same week, and the last actual strike was circumvention. So I had a strike for cyberbullying for a video that was a couple months old after the COVID misinformation, after election misinformation. And then they gave me a circumvention strike because I posted on my second channel saying, hey guys, I got a strike. I can't stream for a week. I'll see you soon. And they said that I was circumventing the ban by still posting. And not only did they delete my 2 channels, but also any fan channel, anybody who had Sneako in the title that were uploading clips. And I allowed people to, encourage people to go and clip it up and put it on TikTok, YouTube Shorts, IG Reels. They wiped it completely. And I even made new channels afterwards. Banned. They are actively trying to wipe it out. And that was played in the Senate committee for inspiring domestic terrorism, for platforming somebody that they call a Holocaust denier and singing a Jewish song.
And my question to you is, first of all, did these strikes happen within a very short period of time, or did it happen over a long period of time?
In a short period of time. It was about a little less than a month. And I even had some false strikes that they tried to get me for. At one point, I was wearing what I'm wearing now, wearing a tank top, and I was doing push-ups, and they gave me a nudity strike. And but I was able to appeal that. But I mean, there was a lot of instances of people were watching my stream on BotTube before I was banned. They saw that they were actively censoring it all the time. If I would talk about 9/11, suddenly the stream would just shut off in the middle. They saw me get played in the Senate. They saw them many times, like certain subjects, the stream would just freeze, and the YouTube would say policy violation, stream off.
When did this thing start happening? Was there a turning point? Because from my understanding, your content or your character and your persona changed throughout your kind of public life. Maybe some of the things that you were saying in the beginning was more, in line with some of the liberal values, and then you became a little bit more, I don't know, people say that you become red pill. Is that a fair assessment, or is that not a fair assessment?
I would say yes and no. There were certain ideas that I would follow that were liberal, but at the same time, I was undercover red pill for a long time. I voted for Trump in high school when I was 18. That was the first presidential election that I participated in. And I kept that secret for a while when I was in college because I didn't want to get called a racist Trump supporter. And as well, even back in 2015, I was talking about feminism and why that's a lie. And I was talking about how I was inspired by Malcolm X specifically. Obviously, shout out to, he had a transition from the Nation of Islam to actually going to Mecca and having his Hajj. Is that the correct terminology? You say you have your Hajj? Is that the right word to say it?
Yeah, Hajj, yeah, that's right.
You have your Hajj?
Yeah, you can say you've done a Hajj, or you've gone to pilgrimage, or you've gone to Hajj, or it's fine.
Yeah, I was talking about that. And
okay, so all this aside, I mean, this is something we're going to unpack, certain parts of it here and there, but what I'm noticing here, is I feel like I've that I'm accustomed to seeing interactions of these sorts, and I see genuine interest. I see genuine interest from Sneako here in knowledge, right?
How Malcolm X really inspired me, and I was talking about feminism as brainwashing, and I was talking a lot of red pill ideologies, but I would say the 1 minute podcast series, this was a street interview series I did in New York City. I still do it, but it's a little bit difficult now because of the cancellation. But I did this 1 minute podcast series where I'd set up a microphone and a table and in the middle of the subway stations in New York City. And so I would just interview people, and I was asking questions that I really wanted to figure out what the public thought about, because there was these ideas being pushed in 2017, 2018, like fat acceptance. And I just asked people, is it okay to be fat? And seeing people try to justify why it's okay to be fat and not knowing why, or asking people, are men and women equal? Everybody really wanted to say, yes, men and women are equal, but they had no reasoning why. So figuring out that everybody was programmed to operate with feelings over facts, I think that really made me realize how much brainwashing there is in what I would say fully red pill.
And how has your life changed, like in terms of, maybe not to be too personal about this, in terms of your, for example, finances or something like that, before and after YouTube? So for example, now that you're on Rumble, I take it, and I don't know what other, I think you're on Twitter as well, of course.
Got my Twitter back,
just recently been reinstated. Yeah. So you're on a couple of streams, but obviously YouTube has monetary advantages. So you can have advertisements, you can have sponsors and all that. Have you taken a hit financially from this?
Well, when they canceled me off of YouTube, they froze about $200,000 from ad revenue. I was doing really well on Google AdSense. And one thing for anybody listening, if they terminate you, they keep all the money that they owe you. They froze my AdSense account as well. But financially, I just have to be more diligent now. And the truth is, Tristan Tate was telling me this, that you can't rely on AdSense. When you're talking about this, it's like there's no point in ever relying on advertisers. You need to start your own businesses. So I have my course, The Creativity Kit, that's doing really well. It's actually releasing tomorrow at midnight. I'm not sure when this is going to go up, but this is my private network where I teach people how to make money online. And I have a lesson every day from different wealth creation methods. And also it's a network of people who want to go and find like-minded people who want to make money online and start a business. So also Rumble.
Is it similar to Hustlers University, or?
It's more curated to a specific group. I'm only limiting it to 1,000 people because I do a lot of the lessons. I'm in there. I was in there last month 3 times a week, talking to people and answering questions and teaching people, bringing on different professors from drop shipping and e-commerce, web design, crypto, trying to teach people and bring everything that I've learned. I've learned a lot in the past few months from a lot of different millionaires. And so I'm trying to bring that to my audience. So it's more curated and specific. And also it's a networking community. There's people in there that have met and actually moved together and started businesses together from that community, because I've always taken the idea that it's hard to find like-minded people with the circle that around you. A lot of people that I grew up with, you know, they're playing Fortnite, playing GTA, smoking weed, playing FIFA, doing the same things that we were doing back when we were 16, 17. And sure, that's fun. There's nothing wrong with that. But I'm on a constant journey of growth, and I can't grow if people are constantly playing FIFA. So the people that I work with, I've all met them online, and I want to provide that for the people that watch my streams.
I see. And so you're talking about your own personal journey. Have you looked into Islam as a way of life that you could potentially embrace yourself at all?
Of course I have. I've been thinking about Islam for a long time. I think the first time that I was really seriously considering it, people will think that I'm lying about this, but I was really infatuated with Malcolm X when I was very young. His autobiography, seeing his journey and how he went from living a degenerate life, you know, stealing, robbing, pimping, dealing drugs, and then finding Islam as well, first the Nation of Islam, but then finding, you know, the true religion, which he called it, of Islam, and also seeing how he transitioned from being a militant person who was really pro segregation. The reason that maybe he wasn't assassinated early was because he agreed with a lot of the white supremacists that Martin Luther King was fighting against. So Malcolm X was pro segregation, just on the opposite side, and he was realistic, and he was also warning people about white liberals, many Muslims coming to the meetups. And it really surprised me because I was saying I didn't believe in God and I was atheistic, but for some reason what I was talking about resonated with a lot of Muslim people. And a lot of people that I associate with and that have read and understood, they have found peace in Islam. And it seems like a sanctuary from all the degeneracy in the West. I moved out of New York City because I kept seeing what was going on in the pride parades and how drag queens are in schools now and what children are being exposed to.
What is your conception of God like? So, for example, of the two, which do you think is a more plausible conception of God? Would you say the Islamic conception, or would you say the Christian conception?
I see what you're saying, and that's some of the criticism I've had when I've been reading the Bible, the fact that God needed a day to rest. If he's all-knowing and all-powerful,
people in Africa and in Asia and anyone knows how to answer it.
Yeah.
If I were to ask you what is a woman, Sneako,
yeah,
I know this. I know you're going to give me the answer I need, but if I were to ask you what is a woman, what would you say?
A human with a vagina.
Okay, human with a vagina, fine. Or X chromosomes, or all of these are acceptable answers, right? Or
a woman born with a vagina.
Yeah, fine. But what would differentiate her from a girl, for example? From a young girl, like a baby girl.
Maturity, physical maturity.
Physical maturity. Now you've just answered your question about the age of Aisha, because what I've just asked you, what is a woman? And so
part of the reason I had trouble and why I left the church is because I didn't like the idea that God was this guy. And I'm sure that there's
where God rests on the seventh day, where God wrestles with Jacob and loses the wrestling match. In creation, can ask the question why a dog doesn't crawl around, or say what am I doing here? Many of those countries, which are Muslim majority countries, they have already been predicted to have, by the Prophet Muhammad, as countries which would be occupied by Islam. And these are just some examples. I mean, there are even examples of what's going to happen today in our times relating to the woke movement. You'll be very surprised about what the Prophet told us and what's going to happen. For instance, on the issue of degeneracy, which you mentioned, the Prophet Muhammad predicted in the hadith, which is authentic, that people will be doing fornication outside of marriage. There will come a time where people will be fornicating outside of marriage, to a point where new diseases will be invented. It's not that they will just contract diseases. that new diseases will be invented. There'll be an advent of sexually transmitted diseases. That, in addition to the you were talking about crypto, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told us something about the economics of today. He said that it will all be an interest-based system. The whole thing will be an interest-based system. And he mentioned, إن لم تأكله إن لم يأكله أصابته من غبار. That even if someone does not consume the interest-based system,
they'll be part
the
of it.
dust of it will be, he'll be afflicted by its dust. So the entire system, you might have gone to Dubai and Abu Dhabi and you've seen how tall some of the buildings are. Even that's been mentioned by the Prophet. He said in the future, the barefooted Arab will be competing with one another to create tall buildings. يَتَطَاوَلُونَ فِي الْبُنْيَانِ. This is mentioned in Bukhari, in the authentic source. That they'll be competing with it. If you see the Saudi Arabians, they're competing now with the UAE and the Qatar, and they're all trying to create tall buildings. The fact that they have even the money to do that now. I mean, because the thing is, you could say, well, maybe it's a self-fulfilled prophecy. But you can't create a self-fulfilled prophecy if the economic resources are not available. I'm saying that there's a wealth of evidence. There's a wealth of evidence to show that the Prophet Muhammad was a true prophet.
We have
Having
the
heard
evidence.
that,
No one can dispute the evidence. We heard the evidence. We saw the evidence.
are you convinced? To what extent are you satisfied with these evidences, or do you have anything to ask about those evidences?
Is the interest-based system?
Yes.
Does the Quran, is that considered haram?
Yes.
And that's created by who? Who created the interest-based system?
I mean, that's not really a religious question now. That's more of a question we can try and investigate ourselves.
Who do you
the
think?
Prophet didn't tell us who created it. He just said that it's going to be there in the future.
I have another question. This is all very good evidence, and I think you clarified a lot of things that I was curious about knowing.
Yeah.
Who do you think did 9/11?
I'll be honest, bro. Like, I'll be totally honest with you, right? There was a video. Because obviously, I watched Loose Change. I watched the documentary.
Those are garbage, though. Those are garbage documentaries.
Yes. I've watched all those documentaries and all those kind of things.
Because the Taliban recently came out. The Taliban just said that Osama bin Laden had nothing to do with 9/11. There's no evidence of that.
Yes, of course. But what I was going to say with that is, there was one thing which made me doubt let's say the conspiracy narrative, or the so-called conspiracy narrative, which is that it was an inside job. There was one thing that made me doubt it, which is there was a particular speaker, which as a child...
Yeah, I think that is probably... It's a great delineation there. The idea that it was an inside job that's just too far. That's way too far. I mean, whether or not that's true is the fact of the matter is, like, the evidence doesn't show. That's just too far based on the evidence. But the idea that Osama bin Laden is the Taliban, is Al Qaeda, is Saudi Arabia, is, Syria, Yemen, Iran, Azerbaijan. Do all of the people who necessarily consider Osama bin Laden and the Taliban and Al Qaeda and that narrative to be true, do they understand the difference between all of those groups? Not to say whether or not not to put into question whether or not they understand their involvement. Do they even understand the difference? Because that's where you start. The difference. It's like, oh, is it, are they a monolithic group or not? Right? Are they one or are they not one?
His name was Anwar al-Awlaki, very well known, and everyone used to listen to him. And he became like, he was attacked by the government and killed, and so he engaged in extremism or whatever. Yeah. What I was going to say was, he came out on a video on YouTube, okay, and he started speaking about 9/11, and he started speaking about it in a way which seems to praise it, like as if it actually happened and it was praised and all this kind of things. So this, for me, put a spanner in the woodworks, because I can't for sure, I'll be honest with you, tell you that I know what happened on that day. Like, I wouldn't put my money on anything, on anybody or any story or anything. Like, if you say put your kid's life on one story or another, I would say I wouldn't put anyone's life on that. Because, to be honest with you, there's too many ambiguities and vagaries. And so that's my stance. I really don't have a strong opinion on the matter. I've seen some documentaries here and there, but I'm happy to be educated. I'm happy to be, to see documentaries and see evidences and so on. But I can't tell you for sure this is 100% or this is 100% what happened. I think there's problems. I've seen all the things, the evidence is like, the insurance company before and all that. I can't say for sure that means X or that means Y or that means Z. And that's why I don't really make a big deal about this issue, because I like to speak about things which I strongly believe in and that I can evidence without doubt. That one it's not really my area, if you see what I'm talking about.
Okay.
We have the evidence. No one can dispute the evidence. We heard the evidence. We saw the evidence.
What do you think about the fact that and this is me speaking really candidly, part of the apprehension to embrace Islam is like the amount of people that are going to say that I'm just trying to copy Andrew Tate?
I mean, the thing is, that's a bit of a weird one, because
Yeah, I don't know what Mohammed Hijab's going to say here, but that's just temporal. That's just a contemporary take on it. I mean, a lot of people may remember Andrew Tate 15 years from now. They may remember that a person who was aware of Andrew Tate converted, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll associate those so strongly as they do in the current time, in the time that it happens.
I mean, at the end of the day, there were greater figures than Andrew Tate in the cultural history of America that have become Muslim. You've mentioned one of them, which is Malcolm X. Are you somewhat African American, or are you fully?
My dad
Asian?
is Haitian. My dad is half black. He's from Haiti.
Yeah. So okay. So someone has African American roots, and you mentioned Malcolm X. See, as you're speaking, I would probably, if I had to guess, I'd probably say you're probably more inspired. You find him more of a figure of inspiration than probably Andrew Tate. And is that correct?
That's correct. And what also do you think about? I'm getting a lot of criticisms from the woke left about the fact that, like, I do engage in premarital sex, and I promote, like, a lot of people think that I want to convert to Islam just for the 4 wives, and that, like, Islam promotes misogyny, stuff like that. What do you think is the proper response to that?
Look, I mean, it's very difficult to have 4 wives or even 2 wives, because when we talk about having wives, it's not the same as having mistresses. These people are part of your life. You've been in relationships before, and you see this emotional baggage. You have to provide for these people. You have to put up with, you have to put up with them, and so on, and their parents, and their, there's extended families. You have to put up with. Imagine 2 of that. So if you had one relationship, imagine doubling this. This is a burden actually on the man. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe they'll take the risk from the houses and so on, and looking, and that if he chooses an idea like Islam, or he's copying that one, or he's doing this, or he's doing, why can't it just be that it makes sense to him? It just makes sense to him. It makes sense to so many people. I myself, I don't know how many, maybe tens of thousands, and this is not an over-exaggeration, of people that either have become Muslim with me, I've seen them, I've told them what I've just told you, and they become Muslim, just like you've seen in Hyde Park, or on the internet, or they declare it somewhere, or through it. So it's not something which is abnormal. So if they say, well, he's trying to copy this one, or it's ridiculous, really. I mean, why would you need to copy?
And it's also, that's a stupid reason to not follow what you really believe in. That's exactly. Not, it's living for the people. I'm just,
you have big figures, like you had, like in the cultural history of America, you had Muhammad Ali, you had Malcolm X. You just mentioned Khabib Nurmagomedov. In many ways, these are all these figures, without exception, are higher rank in terms of social clout than Andrew Tate.
What was your experience? I saw you. I didn't watch the podcast, but what did you think after his conversion?
I thought it was authentic, bro. Like, you know, I sat with him, I spoke with him. I think he's a man that, you know, if you believe in one God and you believe in like what we call the fitra, it's a natural sense of morality, which is like, you know, you have to protect your woman, and you know, you have children, and you know, this is called the fitra, the natural predisposition. It's pretty easy to become a Muslim. It is pretty easy, especially as you've mentioned, in a world where we're seeing all this kind of nonsense happening. It's kind of, for me, it's sickening. And I think what you started off with is actually correct in terms of characterization. When you said that this is a religion of the West, this is absolutely correct. Because first of all, someone will object and say, well, it's not a religion because, you know, a Cambridge definition or Cambridge Dictionary definition or Merriam-Webster definition of the word religion includes things like rituals and divination and so on. The truth is, sociologically, the word religion can mean a system of ideas which tries to explain the world that we live in. For example, Charles Taylor, a great sociologist, had the same idea that you said in the beginning, which is that a religion is not just divining and rituals. It's ideas that shape the world. And nowadays,
they do have rituals. They do have their rituals are protests, climate change protests, and the degenerate things they do. I would say that there's a ritualistic aspect of what they practice.
That is a very powerful point. And look, think of it this way: me and you now, when you were in school,
the rituals are protests.
World that we live in. For example, Charles Taylor, a great sociologist, had the same idea that you said in the beginning, which is that a religion is not just divining and rituals. It's ideas that shape the world. And nowadays,
they do have rituals. They do have their rituals are protests, climate change protests, and
that you said in the beginning, which is that a religion is not just divining and rituals. It's ideas that shape the world. And nowadays,
they do have rituals. They do have their rituals are protests, climate change protests, and the degenerate things they do. I would say that there's a ritualistic aspect of what they practice.
That is a very powerful point. And look, think of it this way. Me and you now, when you were in school, we could have, you know, there's religious education and so on. So maybe they'll teach you about maybe the ancient Greeks. They say, look, they used to believe in a goddess called Athena, right? Or Zeus, you know, you've heard of Zeus, Hercules, and so on. So look, that's what they used to believe in. Okay? And so we'll all look at each other in the classroom and say, why did such a clever people believe in such silly things? That's what we're all thinking. But that is, I would say, it's a more plausible idea than the ideas that they have now, and I'll explain why. At least when the ancient peoples were believing in Zeus, the man with the beard in the sky, basically, which both me and you don't agree with, and we cannot imagine that could be a god. But even then, when they looked at Zeus and said, that's God, that is the god of thunder, or the god of whatever, the top god or whatever, even then, it is not as bad as saying X is Y. And that's what they're doing. They're looking at a woman and saying, that woman is not a woman, that woman is whatever she wants to be. So she can decide to be a man. She can decide to be a penguin. She can decide to be whatever I decide to be.
Your inconsistencies
and then
are glaringly obvious. Your inconsistencies are glaringly obvious.
Ridiculous to a point of comicality. Laughable comicality. I was looking at this case recently. This individual, transgender. Well, he wasn't a transgender in the beginning. He was a man, and then he raped somebody in England. And this is the BBC just had the thing. I'm not sure if you saw it.
Sorry.
And then, you know, he decided to change, and then they put him into a female's, you know, prison and so on. And then they took him out.
Pretty smart idea.
Yeah, it's a smart idea. I mean, even a Muslim guy, you know, he was taken away from his kid, you know, because as you know, in the West, this is one thing I totally agree with the Red Pill on. In the West, the idea of like a man having rights to his children and so on, if a woman just accuses him, she can accuse him of domestic violence, abuse, or whatever, the Me Too, whatever it may be, and this guy can never see his kid for the rest of his life. It could happen. It's definitely, I know people that it's happened to in the United Kingdom, and it does happen in the United States. So this guy, Muslim guy, his wife, scorned, very bitter woman, immoral woman, went and tried to stop him from seeing his kids using the legal system. Okay, now what he did is that he went and he said, I'm a woman now. He transitioned. He pretended to transition, and as a result, now he's the mother. So now it's flipping everything on its head. It's a ridiculous notion. And what I'm saying is that when you refer to it in the religion as a religion in the beginning of this podcast, I think it was fitting, because anthropologists 100 years from now may very well look at our times, just like we're looking at the ancient Greek people, and say that whereas the ancient Greeks, they believed in gods they couldn't prove, they couldn't see, our people, they were looking at things they could see and they were saying they were not the things they could see. It's even more severe than believing about something without evidence, because you're rejecting the evidence. What's more severe than believing in something without evidence is to reject the evidence in favor of that which you believe.
We have the evidence. No one can dispute the evidence. We heard the evidence. We saw the evidence.